Good morning. Welcome to Stimson Center's webinar. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Welcome to Stimson's webinar, Japan as the Defender of International Order. We are still waiting people to start signing in, so we'll give it about a couple of minutes before we get started. Okay, I think people are still trickling in. I was told that it sometimes takes a while, but again, welcome to everyone and happy Valentine's Day. My name is Yuki Tatsumi. I'm a co-director of the East Asia program and the director of Japan program at Stimson Center. And this webinar, which is the first of the 3 to 4 webinar series, is made possible by the collaboration with the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. So thank you to the Embassy of Japan here. Today, I am delighted to kick off this series with the kind of overreaching title webinar called Japan as a Defender of International Liberal Order. For those of you who remember, this is a phrase that the late former prime minister often used when he described his vision for Japan in the international community in the future. And we are delighted to have Dr. Yuichi Hosoya join us from Keio University to share his thoughts on where Japan is today, what kind of a diplomatic evolution that Japanese foreign policy has undergone within the last 10 years or so, and what do we see as we Japan move forward. He really doesn't need much of an introduction, but suffice to say that he has a very illustrious career. He's one of the foremost political scientists and a diplomatic historian that Japan is proud to represent. He is currently a professor of international politics at Keio University, but he also has a dual hat as a director of research at the Asia Pacific Initiative. He was a member of the advisory board at the Japan's National Security Council between 2014 to 2016. And he was also a member of Prime Minister's Advisory Panel on reconstruction of the legal basis for security 1 year prior. He studied the international politics at Rikkyo University in Tokyo. That's where he got his bachelor's, and Birmingham University where he got master's, and he received his PhD from Keio University. And he also has studied abroad, mostly in Europe and France and England, but he's a known speaker and the presenter of the Japanese foreign policy views to the Washington audience as well. Let me go through a couple of ground rules. I will open the session by asking the opening question to Dr. Hosoya, and he responds to my question. And then after that, we will go right into Q&A with the audience. And for those of you who are not as familiar with the Zoom function, please refrain from using chat function. This is the communication channel that Dr. Hosoya and I will use in case of technical difficulties happen. So please do use a Q&A function to present your questions to Dr. Hosoya. So with that, Hosoya-san, welcome. I'm glad to have you, and I'm looking forward to the chat over the next hour. Let me start by asking you this first question. So as we often discuss, international community is currently facing the unprecedented challenges, if you will, against the norms and values that enable the peace and prosperity since the World War II. In your view, what are some of the biggest challenges that the international community is facing today?
Well, thank you for this question, and also thank you very much for your kind introduction and the kind invitation to this webinar. It's always nice to talk with you, Tatsumi-san. And the question is great. Undoubtedly, we are facing so many difficult challenges of the international community. And particularly, let me pick up two big challenges, or two biggest challenges. Number one, the world has become much more divisive than before. It means that we have seen so many confrontations in the world cannot prove to be quite unitary or in solidarity. So it means that we cannot hope for a strong solidarity, which we actually dreamed about soon after the end of the Cold War. Soon after the end of the Cold War, we dreamed of the globalization and a much more global, democratic, and liberal ideals. And we thought that international collaboration, international cooperation could continue much in deeper form. But this actually isn't the situation that we are now seeing. And particularly the structural confrontation between the United States and China is now the core of the nature of international community. And of course, we are seeing two wars, one in Ukraine and one in the Middle East. We are seeing so many confrontations in the world, and this would continue furthermore. So this is one of the biggest challenges that we can pick up. And number two, in addition to this, we are now seeing the decline of democracy, particularly a decline of democracy in leading democracies like the United States. And this is a really, really big challenge to us because now the people in the world are seeing that political system of the authoritarian regime can have much greater appeal to them. So actually, we are now seeing that both China and Russia are proving that or saying that actually that democracy has so many problems. If we combine these two trends, the world seems really much gloomier than we previously anticipated. So this year, we will have many elections, and the voters will decide the future direction of the international community. I think these two trends are two biggest challenges that we are seeing in the current international community.
Thank you for that thought. And indeed, in Washington D.C., we are witnessing those election-related issues unfolding just about every day now. But so I think, and then you're right. When you look at across the globe, there are so many elections, and I'm personally very curious how all these elections in Europe might turn out. But and then we can talk about that on a separate occasion. But as you mentioned, indeed, world is facing many challenges. And if we recall, late former Prime Minister Abe presented once a vision of Japan as among the leading countries to uphold and defend the existing international liberal world order as we knew it after the World War II. That was the vision that he presented was almost a decade ago. How do you describe Japan's efforts since then in that regard?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had been effective in trying to maintain the liberal international order in two ways. Number one, he had been trying to encourage the United States to remain a superpower or a responsible a major power in the international community. And number two, he had been successfully maintaining a very close relationship with the United States, even under Donald Trump's presidency. Unlike many European leaders, he believed that even under President Donald Trump, he thought that the US-Japan alliance could be maintained. And he was extremely successful in doing this. And after Shinzo Abe, I think that both Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga and also Prime Minister Fumio Kishida have been also quite successful in maintaining Japanese role as a defender of liberal international order. Number one, Prime Minister Suga played a very important role in upgrading Abe's initiative to form the quadrilateral cooperation among the four major democracies in the Indo-Pacific. And also, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has been very successful in deepening cooperation among the like-minded countries in the area of the economic security. By doing these, I think that Japan maintains a very important role as a defender of liberal international order, even after the resignation of the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Oh, sorry. Indeed, I think his successors have been quite successful, kind of basically maintaining, holding that basic core principles that late Prime Minister put out, but then add their own touches along the way. You have referred to Japan's role in, Hosoya-san, in your past writing. I noticed that you have referred to Japan's role as the bridge between the East and West. But I would argue that some may argue, though, that in today's world, it is really not just only about East and West, but then also the connection with the global South is becoming more and more important. Do you think Japan can contribute to play its role as a bridge, not just between East and West, but then also in a sense the North and South, particularly the global South? And I know you have recently written about that as well.
Well, thank you very much. I actually wrote that Japan's role about the bridge between the East and West in this book. And this is a huge book, actually, Japan and the IISS. And then particularly I focus on the importance of Japan's role in connecting Western society with, Eastern civilization. Actually, Japan had been at the periphery of Western international order. This brought many problems to Japanese foreign policy for decades. But after the end of the Second World War, I think that Japan has refound or trying to reconstruct Japanese role as a bridge between the two civilizations, Western civilization and Eastern civilizations. And after the end of the Cold War, I think that Japan continued this role as a bridge between the East and the West. And particularly, as I mentioned, we are seeing the much more divisive international community. We need that some of the countries must play important role in amending these confrontations. And I think that Japan has been playing this role. And particularly since the beginning of the last year, we have seen the rise of the global South. And the global South, so-called global South countries, even though the phrase of the global South is sometimes doubted, but still, particularly India has been boosting a leading role within our representing the global South. And we cannot ignore it because liberal democratic camp is now becoming a kind of a minority. Like at the end of the Cold War, G7 countries occupied around 67% of the global GDP. So this was, the G7 was a kind of majority in the international community, particularly international economy. But nowadays, it occupies only around 40% of the global economy. So it now becomes actually a minority international community. So G7 alone cannot monopolize important values and norms of the international economy or international community. So Japan, as the presidency of the G7 countries last year, tried to bridge G7 with the G20 and also tried to bridge the liberal democratic countries with global South countries. This was important because without the support of global South countries, international community cannot maintaining its support for Ukrainian effort to defend its own country or to prevent further encroachment of Russian invasion into Ukraine. So by inviting global South country to our camp, I think Japan last year played a very important role in bridging the liberal democratic camp with the global South countries.
And of course, we cannot talk about the global south without really referring to the Prime Minister Abe's going out of his way to extend olive branch to the Africa as well. So this will be my last question from you, and then I'm seeing already a question trickling in, so I'll move on. But lastly, so we talked about you just shared with us, your perspective on a whole host of issues. But lastly, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges to Japan as it continues to try to play this role? That's core principle being set by late former Prime Minister Abe, and since then had been the ball moved forward by the Prime Minister Suga and now Prime Minister Kishida.
Thank you very much. I like to focus on the importance of the transformative nature of the liberal international order. Last year, I edited a volume entitled The Transformation of the Liberal International Order, and the subtitle of Evolutions and Limitations. We often talk about the importance of maintaining the liberal international order, but a liberal international order cannot remain the same. As I said, we are seeing the rapid rise of the global South countries in the international community. And also I mentioned the importance of understanding that the G7 is becoming a minority in global economy. It means that the norms and values are also changing in the international community. And we need to listen to more about what the global South countries are talking about, or non-Western countries are talking about. And to understand it, we need to fully aware of the importance of much more engagement of liberal democratic countries in these countries. But on the other hand, as I mentioned in the beginning, the liberal democratic countries are becoming much more inward looking, losing interest in the other countries overseas. So this is the biggest gap that we are seeing, even though we have to understand much deeply about what the other countries are thinking about. But on the contrary to these, we are becoming much more inward looking in our democratic society by losing our interest in foreign countries, like we are losing our interest in supporting Ukraine or other countries, which are endangering their own sovereignty and as well as survival. So in this way, I think that the West, we have to really aware of the importance of the fact that the Western countries cannot monopolize the justice and the power in the international community. And I think that the Japanese role is trying to spread the basic understanding of the transformative nature of the liberal international order. On one hand, Japan has been defending the liberal international order, but on the other hand, Japan is trying to pursue the importance of transformative nature of the liberal international order where the Western countries are facing limitations to monopolize importance, justice, and power.
Thank. Okay. Thank you. I was going through to figure out that which question I should go first. There's, I think this is a good segue into the question, the Q&A session, which is very, I think, linked to what you just mentioned about the transformative nature of the international liberal order. So there's a question from Dr. Gil Rosnan. Good morning, Gil. Is being a bridge contradictory to supporting Japan's U.S.-led international, Japan's support for the U.S.-led international order and the G7? Does it mean the less support for universal values in 2020? Does it mean less support for universal values? For example, Japan does have some differences in its policy vis-a-vis certain countries. And I think the Myanmar is probably one of the examples. So do you see any, I guess, a contradiction between supporting the international order and the G7 versus, playing this a bridge role that you just laid out?
Well, this is very difficult question. Gil always gave me difficult question, but actually I learned many things from his books and articles about how non-Western world have been playing in an important role in the international community. We cannot simply look at the trends of the G7 countries or the US-led international order, but of course the other countries' powers are playing an important role. And what I want to say is to this question, what I want to say is that the position of the United States or the US foreign policy is not fixed. It's moving. And there are so many opinions within the United States. So we can understand the different interpretation about US-led international order because the United States is not so unitarily actor in the international community. There are many different voices in the United States. And we are encouraging some of the positions or voices within the United States while trying to persuade the other voices to understand more about outside world. Of course, we fully understand that United States has been becoming much more inward-looking in many ways. And some of my European friends have been saying that the United States is becoming a faraway countries in our understanding of the international community. So on one hand, I think that we have to, that Japan has to create a kind of a solidarity among like-minded partners like Japan and also Australia, New Zealand, Canada, maybe Korea, ASEAN countries, and also European countries as well. I hope that the United States would join in the circle without alienating allies and partners and friends. But the United States can alienate or antagonize to these friends and partners or allies. But American voters would decide which direction the United States is going. And we will see the result after the presidential election. But even after the presidential elections, the division within the American society continue. There are many different voices. This is the strength of the United States American democracy. Even with one president, there must be many different opinions. Also, in the Senate, in the Congress, there are so many different forces and different parties, different opinions. So I think that in this way, even though we have to understand the gap between US-led international order and the G7, but as I said, the world has become much more divisive. And in each country, we can see many divisive or the different opinions. So while understanding the gap between American-led international order and the G7, but there is a gap between G7 and G20 as well. And there is also a gap between G7 and outside world of the G7. So in this way, what we are trying to do, or what we should do in Japan, would be to defend some of the core values which can attract more people and more countries. If these core values are not attractive enough, these values cannot invite many countries. So we have to find out which kind of values can attract the most of the countries in the international community. And previous some of the norms of the West cannot be useful enough to attract those countries. So maybe we cannot revise some of our previous understanding of the core values of the international community. So this is a quite indirect way to try to answer to Gil's question.
Thank you, Hosoya-san. This is so in relation to this, changing, protecting what's very at the core, but then also encouraging the world to adapt to the new reality. What role can Japan play in terms of its presence in Africa, especially at a time when new economy blocks like BRICS and other economic groupings are emerging and seemingly at competition with each other?
Thank you. This is a great question, and I really like to say that Japan twice, after the end of the Cold War, twice tried to focus on the importance of Africa. Number one, in the middle of the 1990s, when many leading powers actually lost their interest in Africa, Japan began important forum of actually TICAD, Tokyo International Conference on African Development. I remember that around that time, many African countries were thankful for Japanese important leading role to focus on the importance of African economic development. Even the Japanese contribution would be quite limited, but the way how Japan tried to focus or put the light upon the importance of African economic development would be important. And of course, soon after that, China actually played a much larger role in trying to invest in or trying to develop African countries. So in this way, I really like to say that in different ways, both Japan and China played or have been playing an important role in investing in Africa or investing in African future. In many ways, I think that Japan and China have commonality in doing these. And secondly, Shinzo Abe played a very important role in as well, putting an important light upon African economic development in 2016, when in August 2016, Prime Minister Abe launched a very important diplomatic initiative of the free and open Indo-Pacific, as Tatsumi-san already mentioned. By doing this, I think that the more and more countries increase their interest in African economic development, particularly East African countries, as well as the Indian Ocean Rim countries play a very important role because when we are seeing the decline of population in particularly Northeast Asia, Japan, China, and Korea, we are seeing the rapid rise of demography population in both South Asia and East Africa. I mean, the Indian Ocean Rim countries. So this should be the focus of the next economic development. I think Japan's or Prime Minister Shinzo Abe played a very important role in focusing the importance of Indian Rim countries by creating a new regional concept of the Indo-Pacific. I think this initiative was mainly based upon the economic incentive to try to maintain Japanese economic growth by linking Japanese economy with these countries. That's why the second pillar of the FOIP, free and open Indo-Pacific, is connectivity. Connectivity is the world to connect different sub-regions, including actually China. So this is not a confrontational regional vision to alienate China, but this is a quite inclusive vision to try to connect different sub-regions in the world. So in this way, I think that the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's role or vision has been extremely important to understand the new phase of the importance of the African economic growth.
Thank you. And I'm seeing, on the Q&A chat, but then, there's a really a lot of people actually writing in about Prime Minister Abe's involvement in the Africa and an outreach to Africa, and then how countries in Africa really, to this day, appreciate that his personal attention to that part of the world. One of the developments in the last since in the 21st century is the expanding role or rising role of the non-state actors. So as with the rise of non-state actors and non-traditional threats, and these two are kind of also becoming a threat to the existing, nation state-based order, what do you think are the Japan's role in responding to this challenge?
So non-state actors would include, could you maybe add a few, I
I
understand
think
the
yeah,
yeah.
probably I'm just guessing, but the person who asked that question probably have kind of a transnational organization, terrorist organizations, those actors who that are not bound by the boundaries of a nation state. They, their activities and connectivity amongst them kind of transcends the borders in our traditional understanding of the word, and presents a challenge
Right.
to the existing international order. That's at least my interpretation of this question.
Great. That helped my understanding about the question. Thank you very much indeed. I think this is a great question. In the beginning of this talk, I talked about the importance of the divisive nature of the current international community, and divisive in many ways in each region. The nature of the regional order is quite different. Like, European countries, we are seeing the integration of nation states. The European Union is something like a state or federation with its own common currency, with its own institutions, strong institutions, as well in EU law as well. But on the other hand, if we look at the Middle East, nation states are quite new, and we have not yet seen the consolidation of each nation states. Religion are still very important. Religions are still very important, and also ethnic groups are also very important in these countries in the Middle East. So nation states are important, but at the same time, nation states cannot cover everything. I mean, the sovereignty in the region is not yet quite consolidating, I would say. And African countries, the situation is something like that. But on the other hand, if we look at the trends in the East Asia, we are seeing the stronger nation states or nations in the region. So in each region, the degree of the development of the sovereign state systems are perhaps quite different. So to understand the current nature of international relations, we have to look at the different kind of a system in each region. And in the middle, as I mentioned, in the Middle East, non-state actors are more important, I would say, than in East Asia. In East Asia, national governments are more important than in the other regions. But on the other hand, when we look at European countries, even though national governments are important, but the role of national governments in Western Europe are becoming much more relative than before, a century or 2 centuries before. So in this way, I think that this is a very difficult question because it depends on which region we are looking at. And so in some regions, non-state actors are becoming more important. But in the other countries, like in China, we cannot simply say that non-state actors are important because governments are controlling more and more people in the country, within the country, and non-state actors are losing some of the important influence within China. So in that way, I think that it is more difficult than before to understand the nature of international community as each region presents different kind of system according to the degree of the development of the sovereign state system.
Thank you. You talked about in earlier remarks respond to the question before this one. You talked about Mr. Abe's outreach to Mr. Abe's, I guess, recalibration of the concept of Indo-Pacific, and you talked about FOIP. So there's a question about your past writing about FOIP 2.0. So Japan's conceptualization of the FOIP, has it been modified or shifted its focus in any way? And if so, what are they? And then what do you think may have driven that shift? That is the question from Isozaki-san currently at Hudson Institute.
Of course, this is a very important question as well. I wanted to write a new article entitled FOIP 3.0, but I abandoned the idea because the reason why I tried to do it was because in March last year, Japanese government launched a new diplomatic initiative to present a new plan for the FOIP, free and open in the Pacific. And that initiative was launched in Delhi, in India, focusing on the importance of Japanese collaboration with global South countries. So since the beginning of the last year, Prime Minister Kishida has been saying that liberal democracy or G7 alone cannot run the world. It is more important than before for the G7 to collaborate with the global South countries. So that's why Prime Minister Kishida, as well as Foreign Minister Hayashi around that time, had been visiting many global South countries to deepen Japan's tie with these countries. So this is a new trend. So FOIP 1.0 particularly launched around during the first Abe administration, was focusing on the importance of the collaboration among leading democracies in the Pacific. I mean the Quad, particularly Japan, United States, India, and Australia. And I think that the Prime Minister Abe was keen on deepening Japanese security cooperation with these countries, particularly United States, Australia, and so on. But well, after that, one of the key trends in the second Abe administration was the rising importance of the ASEAN. ASEAN is located between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. So without the support of the ASEAN, it was totally impossible for Japanese government to continue a leading role as the defender of free and open Indo-Pacific by trying to pursue aid, or by trying for the purpose of embracing the ASEAN. It was essential for Japanese government to present much more inclusive regional vision, because the ASEAN countries really didn't like to alienate China from its own regional vision, as is presented in its own AOIP, ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. So this was a new trend in the second half of the second Abe's administration. So during the phase, I think that the Japanese government had been trying to present a much inclusive regional vision. But nowadays, this actually cannot continue anymore because of the current difficult structural confrontation between the United States and China. Of course, Japan cannot abandon Japan's alliance relationship with the United States. As long as Japan is keen on deepening our alliance relationship, Japan should be sided with an American approach to decouple China or de-risk China. So in this way, even though Japan maintains perhaps its own strong interest in maintaining a close collaboration with China, but it seems quite unlikely for Japan to enable this in the under the current situation. In this way, I think that the 3.0, something like this, should be to present an important initiative to attract as much countries in the global south as possible to be sided with us in maintaining some of the important values and norms. So if we are successful, maybe we can become a shaper of the international order with these countries. And this should be a quite inclusive vision as well, even though Sino-Japanese cooperation seems much more difficult than before.
So one of the questions, so in this era, when we talk about the international politics, US-China strategic competition is one topic that you cannot avoid. So there is a question that speaks to that directly, almost directly. What role could Japan play in reducing tensions in East Asia? Could a long history of shared culture and language routes, along with wars and competition, lead to some cooperation with China and the Koreas, but then perhaps helping to, I guess, manage the gap between U.S. and China, or the strategic competition between these two powers, both of which is important for Japan in a very, very different way, as you laid out in your previous remark.
Well, thank you. Of course, Tatsumi-san can answer to this question much more effectively. I know it, but well, if I need to answer to this question, let
You're the
me
speaker.
Okay, yes, let me answer in this way. Next time I will invite you to some webinar to ask these difficult questions to you. But anyway, let me answer in this way. Well, actually, Japan, the biggest advantage in considering these questions would be that Japan has maintained its close relationship with China in the last 1,300 years. So Japanese records of maintaining a stable relationship with China is much, much longer than American relationship with China in the last several centuries. So what we can say from the point of view of Japan is that just once in the last 1,300 years, Japan was invaded by China. It was not China, actually. It was Mongolia. So in this way, we actually know that, well, hardly China would try to invade Japan or other surrounding countries. Of course, in many ways, China has been quite expansive empire. We know it. But at the same time, China is an expansive empire with extremely careful approach. So if it is possible, China would perhaps do it. But at the same time, unlike Russia, I have to say that based upon our record of historical relationship with China, China has been always careful in doing something. So this is a good news, I think. So in this way, we have to inform or tell China or Chinese leaders that it do not be at all Chinese interest in engaging in a war in either in Taiwan or the Senkaku Islands or anywhere else with the United States. We have to tell them that this is not their interest in doing this. But at the same time, it is always difficult for Japan to maintain or create an equal relationship with China because China has been always an empire with no real exception. So we have only two choices: to be a part of Chinese empire or to be an enemy to China. We have only two choices. And we don't like, the Japan don't like to be a part of Chinese empire. So it's natural that we are seen as an enemy to China. So we can create some kind of stable relations, but without being a part of Chinese empire, I would say that it's always difficult to create a equal relationship with China. When China has serious domestic struggle or power struggle, difficult relationship, maybe to maintain a peaceful coexistence relationship, maybe China presents some option to create an equal relation, but this cannot continue. This cannot be continued. So in this way, I think that always the United States has a dream to create a equal partnership or friendly relationship with China or sister republic. But I have to say that this cannot be created or this cannot be realized. So we don't have to be afraid of being enemy country to China because China would see us in this way. But at the same time, China always try to create a friendly relationship with its own enemies. So we can be an enemy which can create a friendly relationship with China.
That's an interesting paradox. And going back to what you were saying about Japan's effort to create a more inclusive liberal liberal international order, there is a question about this concept of a human dignity that Prime Minister Kishida mentioned several times in his speech at the United Nations General Assembly last year. How do you see this concept kind of fit into this in the kind of a bigger, broader context of Japanese foreign policy in terms of its effort to emphasize, put an emphasis on human dignity, as Prime Minister Kishida mentioned, as Japan continues to pursue, goals like such as FOIP, continuing engagement in Africa, continue of evolutionary recalibration of the concept of FOIP, and so forth.
Well, I'm very glad to have so many professional good questions. Maybe Tatsumi-san could bring so many important people to this webinar. That's why we can enjoy having so many good questions. This is a good question because since last September, as you mentioned, since Prime Minister Kishida's speech at the General Assembly of the United Nations, Japan has been focusing on, or Japanese government has been focusing on the importance of maintaining the human dignity in the international community. I think that this is because in the last 1 or 2 years, a democratic ideal or the value of democracy has become much more difficult than before to be maintained, due largely to the retreat of democracy in leading democratic countries, as I mentioned. This is one thing. There are so many problems in democratic society in the leading democracy like the United States or UK or any other countries. This is one thing. So it's very easy for China or any other country to criticize or blame democratic institutions. This is one thing. And the other thing is that to create a more inclusive norm in the international community, maybe one of the best common denominator would be to maintain human dignity in the international community. This is also because after the Cold War, we have never seen such a brutal violation to the human dignity in the last 1 or 2 years, of course, in the war in Ukraine and also the Middle East as well. So one of the most important things for the international community is to stop this, to stop the violation to the human dignity. So I think that it is good thing or right things to do for the Japanese government to appeal that one of the most important tasks for us for the international community is to stop these violations. Instead of saying, or instead of criticizing some of the countries, I think it is perhaps a wise way to say that we need to maintain or defend human dignity, while some countries are actually damaging these human dignities.
Indeed. And another one of the interesting development about Japanese foreign policy after Prime Minister Abe's time in the office is Japan's outreach to the partners outside of the Indo-Pacific, and Europe being the namely one of them. So there is a question that in response to the ongoing threat from Russia, hypothetically speaking, would Japan ever even envision signing some sort of the defense and security cooperation agreement with Ukraine? Could any of the latest deals that Tokyo has endorsed with Australia, Germany, UAE, and US, could they serve as possibly post-conflict templates, or would Tokyo's foreign policy moving forward, at least for a while, vis-a-vis Ukraine, be more in line with the most recent outreach efforts with NATO?
Well, thank you very much. This is also another important question. Tomorrow evening, I will join in or organize an event in Tokyo, in-person meeting, a seminar, public event with Deputy Foreign Minister Kyoto Tsuji, who was formerly a researcher at the CSIS, very fluent in English. And he recently visited Ukraine, Kyiv. And I hope that tomorrow he will present some important diplomatic vision in relation to Japanese support for Ukrainian effort to defend its own country. But I don't know whether he would mention something relating to a Japanese change in the previous position in supporting the war in Ukraine, I mean the Ukrainian efforts, because of course there are so many limitations and restrictions in a Japanese legal system in supporting Ukraine. And we need to change some of the legal system to enable it, and it takes time. So basically, I think that the Japanese support for Ukraine continue to be based upon humanitarian assistance and also economic reconstruction. And also in a week, I mean the next Monday, there will be a Tokyo conference in assisting or promoting Ukrainian economic reconstruction. And I suppose that either Prime Minister Kishida or Foreign Minister Kamikawa would say something very important in clarifying Japanese way to support Ukrainian reconstruction. So I think that Japan can play a very important role because Japanese politics remains quite stable, unlike many other countries. And Japan doesn't have a general election in coming month, but the situation is changing. As you see, Japanese politics is becoming much more unstable, and there will be a possibility that we will see a new prime minister or new administration in a year or two. I don't know, but it depends on the direction of the Japanese politics. I think that without the stability in Japanese politics or the continuation of a cabinet which can have a very good foreign policy, without it, I think that the Japanese role will be seriously undermined. So as long as the current situation continues, I think Japan can play a very important role in supporting the Ukrainian reconstruction. But still, the current Japanese political some of the problems would bring more difficulty in Prime Minister Kishida's foreign policy in coming months. And it would mean that Japan cannot radically change the previous Japanese foreign policy stance on the Japan support for Ukrainian reconstruction.
Thank you. So you just mentioned the Japanese political situation domestically. And in your very first opening remarks at the very beginning, you talked about your observation on the all over the world, you see this trend of the domestic politics becomes more inward looking. Do you see the similar trend in Japanese domestic politics?
Maybe not. I think that, well, Japanese people usually prefers stability, first of all. And number two, Japanese opposition parties remained very weak. So LDP, the current ruling party, can enjoy some luxury in maintaining its own power. As long as opposition party would be united into a single party with a quite attractive new leader, I think the current ruling parties, particularly LDP, can be relaxed in maintaining the current regime. But it would be possible that the opposition party will be united with a quite attractive party leader. And even though Japanese people usually preferred stability, but stability sometimes brings stalemate or decline. So sometimes we need a new stimulus, strong impetus to move forward. So we definitely need some new strong drivers to activate or to enliven, to enrich Japanese democracy. And we are waiting for some of the new trends which would enable these?
Thank you. I'm sorry to kind of globe hop in around the world. We've done Europe, we've done Africa. Coming back to the Indo-Pacific. We're seeing recently we see MOU signed with Pacific Islands and Vietnam, like on a maritime cooperation. Do you see Japan or others in ASEAN, which you talked about, whose centrality is very important still for the Japanese foreign policy, or so Japanese or others in ASEAN leading an effort once again to codify South China Sea Code of Conduct and move forward with it even without China signing on necessarily?
I maybe cannot answer technically to these questions, but let me answer to this question in a different way. In East Asia, Japan and also China are seeing the ASEAN as another superpower in the region. Now, the ASEAN is the largest trading partner to China. At the time when China faced the difficulty of a Western countries' approach to China, I mean the decoupling or de-risking, it would be natural for China to prioritize its relationship with ASEAN to its relationship with Western powers. So with these new trends, I mean, on one hand, China has been investing hugely in the ASEAN countries. And on the other hand, because of our difficult economic relationship with China, I mean, the decoupling and de-risking, we are moving that our destination of investments or trade from China to the ASEAN countries. So it would be extremely harmful for the United States of ignoring the rising importance of the ASEAN, because in many ways, both President Trump and President Biden actually counseled in many opportunities to visit the ASEAN countries, while other powers like China, India, and Japan are realizing the rapidly rising importance of the ASEAN countries. So on one hand, it would be natural for China to speed up its monopolization of the South China Sea, as long as we are seeing the rapid rise of military spending in key ASEAN countries. So it is almost done in the South China Sea. So it is extremely difficult to change the current situation. But at the same time, we are seeing the rapid rise of the ASEAN countries with more military spending. So it means that we are seeing the rapidly changing power balance in the region. I don't know how the changing nature of the balance of power in the region would affect the current situation in the South China Sea.
Interesting. So I still have about like 14 questions that are posed against you. There's no way that we're going to go through all, because as you keep answering these questions, there are more coming in. But I think this probably will be the appropriate last question to ask to close this webinar this evening, your time. So it is obvious from our conversation for the last hour that the world is in the period of the power transition. There are a lot of changes in the power dynamics within and amongst the regions. So given that reality, what, from Japan's perspective, what is the desirable international order? And what is Japan's strategy for try to achieve those visions? And how's Japan's alliance with the United States connected to Japan's vision and strategy?
Well, thank you. And also, let me thank all these good questions from the early morning. This is the power of the United States. You get Bali with power and quite insightful mindset to present many, many good questions. Let me answer to you this important question in this way. First of all, Japanese power is limited. So we cannot expect that Japan can replace the United States role in leading within the international community United States is not at all replaceable by any single power. United States is United States. So Japanese, the Japan can play just a humble role in the international community, but at the same time, maybe let me say that Japan is a kind of an unexpected and unconscious superpower in the international community, just with its close cooperation with other countries. Like during the Osaka G20 summit, we can find a very interesting picture with Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Abe sitting at the center. And besides Shinzo Abe, we can see the face of President Trump and President Putin with President Xi. Only Prime Minister Abe could gather these difficult leaders, President Xi, President Putin, and President Trump. This was just 5 years ago. I mean, 2019 in Osaka. He could do it. We didn't, around that time, expect that the wars are coming. I wouldn't say that the death of Prime Minister Abe would bring wars. Of course, this is not the case. But, well, Japanese role would be to try to revise the direction of the much more divisive international community. So maybe Japan can revise a bit and cannot replace American leadership role. But with Japanese those role, the world can be better place. And Japan can find many partners to do this because many countries understand that this is a good thing to do. And more countries are sided with Japan. It is a great thing to understand because 80 years ago, Japan was totally isolated countries. And Japan was defeated by the Allied power. But after 8 decades, Japan is now at the center of international community with so many friends because Japan made an effort to create friends. So in this way, I think that Japan, together with like-minded partners, Japan can play a role to revise current, quite damaged international community. And well, this is a humble role, but at the same time, this is a very important role, I would say.
Thank you. With that, we literally walked all over the world and discussing all developments in the Japan's role in the different parts. It is so valuable. It was great to have you as the first speaker for this webinar. So thank you again, Hosoya-san, for staying up late for all of us. We very much benefited from your perspective. And for those of you, next one, time is still being finalized, but Hosoya-san's great act will be followed by Dr. Chikaku Ueki of Waseda University, currently on a sabbatical at the MIT Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Again, time is being finalized, but the date for that will be February 27th. So please look out for your inboxes for the announcement. But with that, thank you everybody for a different time zone to joining us this morning, this evening, during the day, wherever you are. Happy Valentine's Day to you all again, and thank you again for Hosoya-san. I hope you will have the restful night of sleep after this webinar, and for the rest of us, have a great rest of the day. And this concludes this webinar. Thank you for joining.